There's a bird in your neighborhood that already knows your face. Every morning, while you rush out the door or stand quietly in your backyard with a cup of coffee, something nearby may be watching you far more carefully than you realize. A crow on the fence, a magpie on the power line, a robin near your window. And the strange part is this bird may remember you for years. Scientists have discovered that certain birds can recognize individual human faces, track human behavior, and even warn other birds about specific people. That means your backyard birds are not just surviving around you, they are studying you. Once you notice the signs, it becomes impossible to ignore them. The same bird appearing every afternoon, the sudden silence when you step outside, the feeling that something intelligent is observing from the trees. And tonight, you're going to discover just how deep that hidden connection between you and your birds really goes. A few years ago, a man in Seattle noticed something strange happening every time he walked through his neighborhood park. The crows would start calling before he even reached the trail. Not random noise, sharp warning calls. Branch to branch, tree to tree. It sounded coordinated. At first, he thought it was coincidence. But then, something even stranger happened. The birds reacted to him differently depending on what he wore. One afternoon, he walked the same path wearing a rubber mask used in a university bird study. Instantly, the crows erupted. Some swooped low over his head. Others followed from above, calling loudly as if broadcasting an alert. That was the moment researchers realized these birds were not simply reacting to movement or body shape. They specifically remembered faces, and not just for a few days, for years. Scientists working with Professor John Marsluff at the University of Washington tested this by exposing crows to certain masked faces during harmless capture and release studies. The birds quickly learned which faces represented danger. But the shocking part came later. Long after the original encounters, the crows still recognized those same faces in crowds of strangers. Even birds that had never been captured began reacting too. The information had spread socially. Think about what that means in your own backyard. That crow staring from the rooftop may not just recognize humans in general. It may recognize your neighbor separately from you. It may know which person leaves food outside, which person chases birds away, which person walks calmly through the yard every morning at the exact same time. That is not instinct alone. That is memory linked to identity. And inside the bird's brain, something remarkable is happening. Researchers found increased activity in areas associated with fear, decision-making, and long-term memory when crows saw threatening human faces again. In other words, the bird was not just seeing a person, it was reliving an experience connected to that person. Like opening a file stored deep in memory. Suddenly, those long stares from backyard birds feel different, don't they? Because maybe the bird on your fence is not casually looking at you. Maybe it is recognizing you the way you recognize familiar faces in your own neighborhood. But crows are only the beginning. Because some birds do something even more unsettling. They do not just remember you, they learn your routines. You have probably experienced this without realizing it. A bird appears at the exact same time every morning. Another waits near the patio when you water the plants. Some seem to vanish the instant you reach for the back door handle, almost as if they predicted your movement before you even stepped outside. That is because many backyard birds are constantly mapping patterns. Your patterns. Researchers studying corvids, including crows and ravens, discovered these birds are exceptional observational learners. They track repeated behavior the same way humans notice routines. Feeding times, safe locations, threats, familiar sounds. Over time, your backyard stops being random scenery to them. It becomes a detailed mental map connected to specific humans. And here is where it gets incredible. Birds do not think with tiny, primitive brains the way people once assumed. Relative to their size, many bird brains are astonishingly dense with neurons. Some parrots and corvids contain neuron counts comparable to certain primates. The structure is different from a human brain, but the processing power can produce surprisingly advanced behavior. Before we go deeper, you need to know one key thing about how birds actually think. First, Birds possess strong episodic-like memory. That means they can associate places, faces, and events together in ways that resemble memory chains. A crow may remember not only your face, but where it saw you and what happened during the encounter. Second, birds are masters of social learning. Young birds watch older birds carefully. If one crow identifies a dangerous human, others can learn the warning without direct experience themselves. Third, many birds use something called predictive behavior modeling. In simple terms, they anticipate outcomes based on routine. If you feed birds every evening at sunset, they begin arriving before the food appears because their brains are predicting the event. Fourth, birds respond emotionally to remembered experiences. Studies have shown measurable stress responses when certain birds encounter familiar threats again. Their bodies are not reacting randomly. Their memories are activating physical responses. And finally, some birds display delayed problem-solving and planning. Ravens have demonstrated behaviors suggesting they can think ahead, store useful information, and adapt future actions based on previous observations. That tiny bird outside your kitchen window is processing far more information than most people ever imagine. Here's a simple test you can try in your own yard. Wear the same jacket for several days while feeding local birds. Then suddenly switch clothes or approach from a different direction. Watch carefully. Some birds hesitate. Others still recognize your movement patterns instantly. It is one of the easiest ways to see memory and recognition happening in real time. If you want to understand what your birds are really doing, thinking, and remembering, subscribe. No sponsorships, just the secret life of the birds in your backyard. Because there is another layer to this mystery that scientists are only beginning to understand. Some birds are not just reacting to humans, they may actually be judging them. There is a moment almost every bird lover experiences, even if they never talk about it out loud. A bird lands unusually close. It tilts its head, stares directly at you, not with panic, not with confusion, but with what feels disturbingly close to evaluation. And the strange thing is, that feeling may not be entirely in your imagination. Scientists studying corvid intelligence have observed behaviors that suggest certain birds categorize humans into different types: safe humans, dangerous humans, predictable humans, useful humans. Their reactions change depending on past interactions, tone of movement, and even eye contact. In your backyard, you are not just another moving object. You are a known character inside the bird's world. That changes the way you see everything. The crow calling loudly from the tree may not simply be making noise. It could be announcing your presence to nearby birds. The chickadees following you through the yard might not just be curious. They may have learned that your gardening uncovers insects in the soil. Even the quiet robin watching from the fence could be calculating whether you are likely to disturb its nest. Every repeated interaction becomes data. And over time, your birds begin building a behavioral profile of you. What makes this even more incredible is how quickly birds can update those profiles. Researchers have seen crows change their behavior towards specific humans after only a few encounters. Positive interactions create familiarity. Negative ones create avoidance or alarm. Some birds even remember which humans consistently ignore them and which ones pay attention. That means the relationship goes both ways. You are observing the birds, but the birds are also learning who you are becoming. And here is the deeper emotional payoff hiding underneath all this science. For most of human history, people believed intelligence belonged almost entirely to us. We looked at backyard birds as background life, tiny instinct-driven creatures fluttering through our world without awareness. But your backyard is not passive. It is filled with minds. Small minds, yes. Different from ours, absolutely. But still constantly perceiving, remembering, adapting, and communicating. Every tree around your home may contain ongoing social exchanges you never hear. Warnings, recognition calls, learned behaviors passed between generations. There is something humbling about realizing that the natural world has been paying attention to you this entire time. And once you truly understand that, ordinary moments start feeling completely different. A crow watching from a rooftop no longer feels random. A blue jay screaming from the oak tree suddenly sounds intentional. A familiar bird returning every morning begins to feel almost personal. But the most fascinating part is this. Now that you know birds remember faces and routines, you can actually change the relationship yourself. Tomorrow morning, before you check your phone or rush through your routine, step outside for just 5 minutes and pay attention to what your birds are already doing. Not generally, specifically. Notice which birds stay calm when you appear. Notice which ones immediately sound alarm calls. Watch who follows at a distance and who keeps returning to the same branch while observing you. Once you start looking for patterns, your backyard begins to feel less like random wildlife and more like an active neighborhood filled with personalities. One of the easiest ways to build trust with local birds is consistency. Birds learn predictable behavior extremely quickly. If you place fresh water in the same location every day, many species will begin incorporating that spot into their routine. The same happens with feeders, garden activity, and even your movement patterns. And here's something most people never realize. Direct staring can make birds nervous. In the animal world, prolonged eye contact often signals threat or predatory focus. That is why birds sometimes relax when humans move calmly or avoid sudden motions. Tiny changes in your behavior can completely alter how birds respond to you over time. You can test this yourself. Walk through your yard quickly for several days, barely paying attention to the birds. Then change your pace. Move slowly. Pause often. Avoid abrupt gestures. Many birds will allow you much closer because they are actively updating their assessment of your behavior. That adjustment is happening inside their memory systems in real time. Another incredible thing to try is individual recognition. Pick one regular visitor in your yard and study its markings carefully. A damaged feather, a unique hop, a slightly different call. Over weeks, you may begin recognizing the same bird repeatedly. And strangely enough, the bird may begin recognizing you just as clearly. This is where backyard birdwatching transforms into something deeper. You stop seeing a crow or a robin. You start seeing individuals. Scientists who work closely with corvids often describe this moment as a turning point. Once you recognize individual personalities, bird behavior suddenly becomes far more complex and emotional than expected. Bold birds, nervous birds, curious birds, problem solvers, opportunists. And that realization changes the emotional atmosphere of your yard completely. Because now every call from the trees feels connected to an intelligence making decisions moment by moment. But there is one final piece to this mystery that makes everything even more powerful. The birds remembering you today may not be the only ones watching tomorrow. Right now, somewhere outside your home, a bird is probably perched on a branch, fence, rooftop, or telephone wire watching the world move below it. Cars passing, dogs barking, people walking through familiar routines, and somewhere inside that small brain, certain faces already mean something. Safe, dangerous, familiar, interesting. Maybe yours is one of them. That idea feels almost impossible at first because most people were raised to think of backyard birds as simple creatures drifting through life on instinct alone. But the deeper scientists look, the stranger the truth becomes. These birds are remembering, predicting, adapting, teaching, warning, and learning from the humans around them every single day. Your backyard has never been silent. It has been full of conversations you were never meant to notice. A crow teaching younger birds which humans to avoid. A robin memorizing the safest feeding hours in your yard. A blue jay recognizing the sound of your back door opening before you even step outside. And suddenly, the ordinary world feels different. The morning bird calls outside your window no longer sound like background noise. They sound like communication between intelligent creatures living parallel lives all around you. Creatures with memories, preferences, social bonds, tiny mental maps of the humans who share their space. That is why people who truly start watching birds rarely stop, because eventually you realize you are not just observing nature, you are participating in a relationship. And maybe that is the most mind-blowing part of all. Long before humans built cameras, tracking devices, or artificial intelligence systems to study animals, the birds had already been studying us. Quietly, patiently, generation after generation, watching who feeds them, watching who threatens them, watching who belongs. So the next time a bird pauses and stares directly at you from the trees, remember this: there is a real chance it knows more about you than you think. If you want to understand what your birds are really doing, thinking, and remembering, subscribe. No sponsorships, just the secret life of the birds in your backyard. And after this video ends, go outside for a few minutes and look carefully. Because once you realize the birds are watching too, your backyard never feels ordinary again.